Hi, Kelly Springer.
Hello, Ellen Brown.
How are you today?
I'm loving life. I already had a
You
good
are loving
meeting.
life. You jumped on, and here we are. I'm making sure that we are going live on the Substack. It is just, there we go. We are here. Okay. This is always like a little bit of a delay, and it kind of freaks me out, and I just want to make sure there's no problem.
And we're on the right one?
We are on the right one. So we were talking about this a little bit this morning. For anybody who sees me with the top knot and the tank top, and so basically, I said to Kelly this morning, I could not be bothered. So any of you who saw me last week, I see some names popping up that saw me last week in Nashville, and then possibly saw me in Texas. That is not how I roll, and like this is how I roll. And the idea of having to like primp and do all those things this morning just really was not, I couldn't force myself. Plus, as we were talking about, the practical side of this from a health perspective is that I went for a 3.5 mile walk this morning, but because I'm sidelined from a hamstring injury for running, a little bitter about that, but I still need to go to the gym, and it wasn't all going to happen at once. And so the idea of like trying to do this in between and look all fancy in any way. So here it is. So this is like the hack of how do you fit it all in?
Yes. So my hack is now lipstick. I realized at my presentation on Saturday in Chicago that I looked dead. And so now I don't even need to shower anymore. I just put on lipstick. So that's my new hack. And top growing my hair out so I can just put it in a bun again. And I was laughing because when we got on, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're both just getting it done. But
You're just getting it done.
lipstick,
Here we are. So we're going to talk.
yeah,
Okay. So welcome for everyone that's on. Welcome to Unprocessed and Unfiltered. I'm Ellen Brown, and you are Kelly Springer.
yes.
And there's a difference between avoiding bad food and actually eating nutrient dense. And we built this show around that gap. So 30 minutes, we're going to jump in. But poor Kelly, I just have to warn everybody. I love it. Megan, who saw me last week, said it's a messy bun kind of day. So there you go. Okay, so there was something I just feel really bad for everybody because Kelly was like totally prepped for the show this morning. And then I texted her half an hour ago and said, can you talk? She's like, no, I'm on a call. And I said, okay. She called me and I said, I've hijacked the episode a little bit. And so we're going to do this a little bit on the fly. Something happened last week that is really important going into this week that I just need to put on everyone's radar from a political perspective. I am not a political person. Anybody who knows me knows I am involved in policy, but I'm only involved in policy when I get asked to be involved in policy, and it's typically in the back room. And it's putting the right people in the room. It's advising technically on different things, whatever, pulling the right people together, convening. But like, I don't want to be on some front-facing council, committee, whatever. If I need to testify, I'll testify. You get the idea. But this is very, 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 very important when we talk about eating well, when we talk about nutrient density, when we talk about taking care of the nutrition in our bodies, is it's not just about the nutrient density of the food. That's important. And regenerative agriculture practices, we talked about this a little bit last week, are key to adding that nutrient density. There's another really important piece to what regenerative ag, when it's done right, typically does, which is it reduces or for the most part can remove the chemical load from our food. So why am I talking about this at a political level is that last week, our good friend, bestie, Kelly Ryerson, and a whole host of others, but she was key to this. If you ever want to find her, she's on Instagram as Glyphosate Girl. She's been after this for decades. She, in an unprecedented way, basically overcame like everything, and ultimately there was a pesticide liability shield that was in the farm bill, and she's been pushing this forever, and they took it out in the middle of the night last week. They actually removed this pesticide liability shield, and it would have been something that would have protected Bayer and other chemical companies from being sued by people who say their products cause cancer, and also just, as you can imagine, using that kind of until eternity. It's gone, but here's the key. Senate is next. And there is a lot of talk that those same companies, so it's interesting because a lot of the politicians that were taking a lot of money and supporting that really got a lot of flack, because Kelly has mobilized millions of people to say it's not okay. And so basically where we are is, if you are willing, it would be really helpful to reach out to any of your senators to say you're not okay with the liability shield, because from what we understand, they're trying to backdoor now to the Senate to try and put this thing back in sneaky ways. And so that's it. So what I still want to do today is talk about the importance of nutrient density. And what we had planned on doing was really talking about it from an AI perspective, because there's so much information that you can get from AI. And Kelly, as having you having a company that is a whole host of registered dietitians that help people figure out what to do, AI is actually a really important tool. As you know, I've gone like super, super deep with Claude on my own. I use it for nutrition. I use it for all things. So basically, the food on our plate has two stories running through it, because the chemicals that are loaded into our food have a very similar response. You can have a diabetic response when there's chemicals in your food, even when it's whole food, versus the same kind of response if you're eating, for example, ultra processed foods that are very calorically dense, full of non-nutrition, etc. So anyways, that's it. So I'm basically diving into like 400 things at once in 5 minutes. So somebody did just say, what should we say to our senator? I want to support. I'm a first-time listener. So anybody who's listening who's willing to reach out, just email your senators and say, I do not support the pesticide liability shield. It is not okay. It is not okay for those companies to not be held responsible for the health implications that their products have on people, as well as the implications on our food supply and our soil. So, but most importantly, it's just that you don't want the pesticide, you want that pesticide liability shield removed from the Farm Bill. You don't want to see it come back in.
Keep it short and sweet.
Sorry. Yes, very short and sweet. And anybody can drop me a line through the Substack, through foodishealth.substack.com, and I can give you more insights. But anyways, okay, go Kelly. I just took like 5 minutes.
No, that was really good. And I think that staying up on where we are with politics, again, I am registered nothing. I feel the same way. I'm here to educate on food. And I will work with any administration that's out there, because it's always going to change. But when these things are great to know, because I don't think a lot of American public know what's going on. So I like the policy. I wish I had gotten into it sooner. I'm now on the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics board, and I'm also on the New York State Dietitian Board. So policy is something now I'm learning about for the first time ever, as being a dietitian for over 20 years. And I can't believe what I didn't know. And so I think it is important to understand policy and understand we do have a voice. And if you do write in to your senator, sometimes they don't know. So it's just one of those things that we do all need to educate. So thank you for saying so. So diving into the AI side, I am extremely excited. Ellen really got me jazzed up. It was probably a month ago, and my head was going to explode, because she was telling me it was like 5:30 at night. I'd already had a glass of wine in my hand, and she was just like telling me all the things, and I wanted to absorb it, and my brain was like, I don't know. So I took her.
Have that effect on people. I pulled some people together for dinner in Nashville the last night, and the one of the gentlemen there was new to us, new to Carter and I, and the other one was not. And he said, so how has the last 2 days been for you? And he's like, well, my head is pretty much just completely drowning. And like, I mean, it's wild. I'm super pumped. And I'm like, but I'm pretty overwhelmed with it all. And he looked at him and he goes, yeah, Ellen has that effect.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I can do this. So just yesterday, we had 4 different conversations about AI and how AI and like attaching, APIs with like our EMR system. Like, these are a whole bunch of acronyms, but basically when we are doing like for dietitian work, we're going to be able now to help with like the scheduling aspect, the medical billing aspect, chart notes, like making our life easier. But what I wanted to talk about today, there is a brilliant medical student who keeps me up to date on all things. Like this girl is like, she's crazy. I got to get her name. She has braces on, which I think is also like interesting. But she dives into research, and that's why I love her. So she talks about the newest things that are happening in GLP-1 space. And just the other day, she dove into AI and medical. So new research has emerged. And even though Ellen is like 100% on AI, under the medical side, the new report is that 44% of actual medical advice could be skewed. And so just to be aware that when we're looking at nutrient density and things like that, AI, yes, go for it. Meal planning, how to put together some fiber sources. If you're looking up like what is the nutrition in a radish, go for it. But when we're talking about if you're trying to look for nutrition for like Crohn's disease, be a little bit leery, get what you want, but also take it back to a medical person for the true advice.
So that's really important. You just pointed out, like, I'm a generally healthy person. I mean, I have an issue with thyroid. I have autoimmune disease. I think a lot of women in my age group, I have perimenopause. I mean, this is again, this gets back to the chemical onslaught. Our thyroids were not made to take on the kind of chemical load that's in our food supply. And I think you make a really good point, which is like, I'm using AI because I want, to be strong and have guns for arms and all these things and try and overcome some of this. But I don't have Crohn's disease, right? So I think there's a big differentiation. As you go into this, I do want to kind of I want to bring us back to a comment last week that hopefully you can thread this in, right? And I think you're already addressing the second piece to this, but I think this is the whole, like, keep it with a grain of salt, but then the tool that it is. I will add that Claude, Anthropic's version of healthcare data, is far superior to chat right now. So what I heard last week when we were in Nashville and even in Texas was most consumers are using ChatGPT. And when I was showing people the side by side of what chat was telling me from a health perspective versus what Claude was telling me, people were blown away, including Dr. Pizzorno, who's like the OG of naturopathic medicine and chemical load and things like that. So like, I do want to say that out loud. But Cheryl from last week, Cheryl was somebody in our audience last week. I feel like this is some kind of talk radio show. I don't exactly know what I say, but somebody that I was watching. Anyways, she said, what would it take to measure nutrient density at the grocery store? And of course, anybody that reads Carter and I's work knows that, like, our vision is to make it hard to make a bad decision at the grocery store. Like, we wrote a book, so we have a draft of this book, and the very last line of the book actually ends with that there are scores in the grocery store, and it's just become the norm to know the nutrient density of your food. Like, that's my vision, right? But that's not available right now. We have Audacious, which has and then there's a Brix meter. Like, Audacious has a tool that measures nutrient density. This is something that consumers can go and take to the grocery store. So to me, AI is kind of this tool of like what most people have access to right now, and it's really useful, right? So back to your point, Kelly, of AI. How does AI? We're talking about it shouldn't replace clinical, but it is a huge support of either.
Oh my gosh!
Kitchen, right? And then also,
absolutely,
like, what kind of questions should people be asking to understand the difference?
Okay, so this, again, it's going to be pulling. So remember, AI is going to pull from everything that it can find out there. So this is where the concern, just because it can be pulling from old data, it can be pulling from everywhere. So if you want to ask it, like, for instance, I do a whole bunch of TV. So New York State apples, I'm like I'm on TV for them. So I'll say, hey, give me some really great talking points on the nutrients of apples that I can put together for a consumer. Like, and then that pulls up, like, the vitamin C. What does vitamin C do? Like, it's really good, and you can learn a lot from AI. It's like really great that way to be like, well, why is an apple good for you? So you've always heard an apple a day. Well, why? Ask AI, why is the apple good for me? What does vitamin C actually do? And it'll pull up great information and the why and the how. Also, how much should you be having of it, like portion size it gets into. So that's where I think it can be extremely helpful. And then you can say, hey, can you also put apples in a recipe for me? there's your apple recipe. So there's like so many cool little things that you can do with AI to really help you to incorporate those healthful foods into your diet. Does that help?
Yeah, that totally helps. And at some point I need to read, I just don't know if I have it handy, but I would love to share with folks. Maybe we'll do this next week is I can share with folks some of what, and I do actually, I was saying to Michaela, I'm planning on writing an article about this because I had this gauntlet of a travel week last week where I was
You did.
embarrassing. Like, I'm not kidding you. My Aura ring told me that I had an 8.5 hour sleep debt, like 8.5 hours. And this was accumulated over a week. Like I was sleeping like 4 hours a night because of everything that was happening, which is not healthy at all. And that has an implication on how your body digests your food, right? Like, because then you have a cortisol spike. You're living on a level of hormones that then your body doesn't regulate. How you're eating is how you're metabolizing is not digestion. I mean that too, but how your body is metabolizing and grabbing the nutrition that you're actually trying to ingest, right, is impacted by your cortisol levels. And these are all things that we don't really talk about. But I would love to share some of what those, again, I've gone really deep in that we're talking about, I think when we talk about AI, I just want to add a dimension to this. It is extraordinarily helpful on a very specific basis, like you're saying, right? Which is like, tell me why a radish is good for me. I would add to your point, anybody who's listening, if you're going to use AI, I highly suggest Claude over chat right now. Now that could change tomorrow. Like these things change like on a dime. But the other thing I would say is ask it to be a dietitian. Ask it to be an expert in something. Say, I want you to tell me, I want you to answer this question as my dietitian. And to Kelly's point, what that does is it actually starts to box in the context library that the AI agent will go out and get the information.
Yes.
For. So
excellent point. That's a great point. Yes.
So that's a really important thing. So like, again, I think for do this now kind of thing, let's save that for the end, but I think that's an important piece. But the other piece that AI does is so let's see if I can say this well. The context library, think about it this way. We have a brain, it can hold so much information. The older you get, the less information I'm convinced that it can hold, right? And it certainly can only process so much information. The way that you think about that with AI is tokens. So in AI language, it's tokens, right? You only have so many tokens to use when you're using AI. It's the same with the brain. But when you look at the exponential difference between a human brain and AI, it's like 50x, 100x. So that way you have to think about it is my brain can only hold and process so much information, but AI has the capacity to give me like 50 more brains, 100 more brains. But you want to tap into the right brains, the correct brains.
The right prompts. And that was part of our conversation yesterday. And I think what you're saying, like putting in the right prompts, like, and that's where understanding what you're asking it to do and what you're asking. And I do think that those prompts can help a lot when we're talking about nutrient density of like, how do I make my meal more nutrient dense, right? So what are ways for me to make it more nutrient dense? So yes, we know we're going to lose some of those nutrients coming from our food coming from California to central New York, but we know that. But how do I make my diet more nutrient dense? And so asking it questions like that, and it's going to say to add in color. Well, what kind of colors? The oranges. What do the oranges do? So we can keep, adding to it and keep adding to those prompts. But being able to ask it those questions is going to help a lot with people understanding what nutrient denseness means.
Well, and so this kind of gets back to what we talked about a little bit last week with nutrient density, and I hit on with regenerative agriculture, is how long it's been between the food coming out of the ground and getting into your mouth has a dramatic effect on how much nutrient density, how much nutrition remains in your food, right? So like if you say, oh, a radish, if you go on to AI and you say, tell me how much vitamin C is in a radish, or tell me what is in a radish that makes it considered healthy, like why I should care about this as a dietitian, it's going to tell you, but that's based on and that the radish on average when it's measured, right? If that radish has been out of the ground for 3 weeks, then chances are it's a fraction of what you actually had, right? And then the next piece to that is, how was the radish grown? So if it was grown with conventional practices, then it's getting a chemical fertilizer, right? So a synthetic fertilizer that's coming into it. And that's what, because the soil itself, when you're looking at conventional soil, it's really not soil. It's pretty much dirt. There isn't a microbiome, a mycelium network in the soil itself anymore. And so it's relying on that input, that chemical input to add the nutrition versus in a regenerative farm, right? In that situation, the soil is full of nutrition, and that nutrition is then getting put right back into those plants, and it's a lot more nutrient dense. So we talked about this last week, where a radish that comes from a regeneratively grown farm probably has, can have more than 70% more nutrition than a radish that's grown in a conventional farm.
And you can also taste the difference. And something I didn't bring up last week, which I was thinking about too, we're lucky in central New York. We have a lot of also regenerative farm meat products. And you can seriously taste the difference between pork that you buy at Wegmans versus pork that you get from these farms. What they're fed, the nutrients, the density from both like the crops, and then also what those animals are eating. It's been, it's really interesting on both sides of the coin there too. And I didn't talk about that at all because we just were talking about fruits and vegetables, but you can taste a complete difference and the nutrient difference in the animals as well. So really interesting too.
Yeah. So I think the piece that we were hitting on with AI, right, is to me, it's not just getting information from it that we're talking about. It's also the breadth of context that it can weave together. And this is the piece that's been really powerful to me, is I went into Claude and I created a project and I downloaded, and now this sounds really daunting, but it took me probably a total of about 4 hours over the course of, some time. I went into each of the EMR, and I went into like LabCorp and Quest, and I pulled all of my PDFs down, all my lab results from like the last 15 years. Any EMR data that existed out there on any records. And I added them all as files in a project in Claude. So I created a project. And then what I did was I created a project to basically start working on my health overall. And then I started adding in, like, for example, there are certain fitness experts that I really trust on fitness expertise, right? And then there are certain physicians that, from a brain perspective, that have done a tremendous amount of research that I really respect. And then there are other physicians that, different angles, right? And so I started basically training my project to say, look, I want you to look at this in this area for brain health. I want you to look towards this construct for physical, for, right? Like all these different things, right? But what's phenomenal about it is it has taken all of that information together, and it creates personalized nutrition for me, knowing I have a thyroid problem, knowing I have autoimmune, knowing I have a methylation deficiency. And that to me is the power that AI gives us that no human is ever going to be able to give. That we tend to get really skeptical about it. To me, that's where it starts to really shine versus just like, is the orange healthy, right? Like you could look on Google for that and get information.
Yeah, I think you can look on Google for it, but that's why I want them to take it the next step forward. That's why I want you to get into make me a meal with the orange, or how can the orange help with other foods? That's what I want it to get into more, and that's how I think.
Oh
like,
yeah,
like that's what I want people to get creative, because when just eating an orange alone is not going to have the benefit of eating orange with something that has iron, right? So like the iron and the vitamin C's, like this is where I think that AI can really help a lot of like, how can I make my meal more nutrient dense, and thinking about it that way, because I feel like in America we've gotten the Google, like just ask me about the orange, but I want to go the next step, put it together in a meal that makes sense and it gives me the most nutrient dense this.
So I am going to show everybody something really quick before we close it down. This should work. All right, you see this okay?
I just see, oh, there we go. Yes.
Okay, so this is what I have in. This is not, by the way, this is a project I created called Recipes. So, and not related to my health. I could do that as well. But what I said was, right, need some recipe ideas to cook, knowing my son loves really flavorful and spicy recipes. So my son, we have talked about this another week. My son has become an avid chef in the last week because he got tired of the fact that I don't cook. So I'm not, I've been gone so much, and then when I'm home, I'm so busy that I haven't been cooking the food that he wants. And so he's 17, and he's been dealing with this for quite some time. And last week, the night before I left, he decided would be the day he would become a chef. And his first attempt was gumbo, and it was unbelievably good. And he made it all from scratch. And he just got a recipe, right? And so then he made gumbo, he made all these things, but he has this like flavor profile, right? So I went in, look, here's what I did. I said, so he just made gumbo, and then he made this Indian butter chicken, and then chicken jambalaya, which I can't even spell correctly apparently. And then look what it gave me, right?
Yeah, the recipe section is amazing. And you can also put in doesn't like broccoli and it'll spit out that, or doesn't like whatever, or allergic, or like has sensitive to onions. And so like this is where AI shines. It is so great. And you can also say change it to have 4 servings versus 2 servings. Like, so this is where AI can be so helpful. I think the recipe section is like the best.
Yeah. And so then it gave me this recipe, it like to cook. And then it actually said, like, if you don't have, because I said, I don't think I have adobo. And so then it said, here's how you could swap it. Right. And like, gave me
But you can, but Ellen, this is where we got into, my favorite F word, fiber. You can get into how do I add more fiber to this dish?
Yes.
This is where we can get really into, again, getting into actual nutrient denseness, not just from the farm, but like, how do we add in more fiber? How do we, like, what are ways to do this? And so this can be a huge, huge time saver, and also bump up on the nutrition pretty easily, and having like those little tricks to be able to get more nutrients in.
Okay, so we got 3 minutes left. So first of all, let me ask if anybody has any questions. Last week we had a lot of comments and things jumping in. So if anybody has any questions, now's the time. But I will say this. Most people might tend to use AI to kind of eat less badly. I would say push yourself to use AI to understand what food is actually doing in your body. So instead of just saying like, what is something healthy, or I need a recipe for tonight, I have chicken, say, I really want to create something that's nutrient dense, high in fiber, or tell me what are some things I should be focused on in my dinner tonight. And the more that you feed AI, the more that it's going to help you throughout the day of like what you're missing, what you need to add, all these kinds of things. You can take pictures, super easy. We'll do this. Maybe we'll dive into this more next week. The next thing is Cheryl last week asked about measuring nutrient density at the grocery store. So while we don't have that meter yet, again, this is a place where AI can shine. You can walk in and say, what's the nutrient density of the apple? Like, tell me what the apple has in it. Now tell me pick a fruit. Here's a call to action. Pick some vegetable or fruit that you would never buy. And in the grocery store, open up your AI and ask it about it. And just learn about it. Like, start to learn more about the different things, a different color, right? Like like Kelly, you've said, eat as many colors as you can, right?
Yeah.
Right. So then do that. I would say that's like, do one thing. And then I think the other thing would be like, I don't know, what's another thing somebody could do?
I think truly say, how do I use this in a recipe? Because I think it's going to pull in how to utilize that item. So especially if it's an item that you're not used to having, if it is an unknown fruit or vegetable, how do you use this? How do I cut it up? What is the best way to open a pomegranate? Show me a video that does that. Like, there's so many cool things like that you can incorporate foods that you may not have had, because we are creatures of habit. We go towards the same food every single week in the grocery store. Explore a little bit, open your mind.
And I will share one more learning is most people think eating really flavorfully is expensive. And my son taught me a hack yesterday, which was he's like sitting in the kitchen with some crazy looking like dried pepper thing. And he's like, "Do you know what this is on the inside?" I was like, "What do you even have?" And he's like, "Well, I went to the Tapatia, which is the Mexican grocery store, and I got these peppers that
Mm-hmm.
I needed for my recipe." And you know what he said to me? He goes, "Guess how much these peppers cost?" And I was like, "How much?" And he's like, $1.67. And he was so proud of himself. And I said, "See, that is a perfect example of we tend to think that it costs so much to eat healthy. You can take the most simple, nutrient dense food and add that kind of flavor profile to it, and it's restaurant grade."
And I want to bring that together because I didn't say it last week. I want to say it this week. That frozen fruits and vegetables are just as good as fresh. They are picked at peak perfection. The nutrients are locked inside and they are a third of the cost. So I get asked all the time about cost of produce. That is a way, if you are concerned about cost, because it's really expensive right now, just to understand that frozen fruits and vegetables are a third of the cost and that they have not traveled. They are actually taken from the field and they are frozen. So
Okay.
just so you know, that is a really
Yep.
great way to save money, get variety, and just want to leave it with that.
So I will say, I'll do a call to action to those that are listening and watching today, which is come send us a note this week, drop us a line if you have any recipes that you've used these frozen vegetables, or if you want us to come with ideas of how to use frozen vegetables, you want to learn some recipes, or and other people like have fun, do recipes like Kelly's saying, bring them next week and we can like throw a couple of them up there. So okay.
And I'll end it with if you want a registered dietitian, just so you know, it's covered by your commercial insurance. So go to kellyschoice.org. We'd love to see you. Most people don't know. Every day, I'm like, people don't know this is a covered service under your insurance. So reach out to us. You can have your own personalized dietitian
Look
who
at
also,
that. Look at that. So
little
all
plug,
right,
little plug.
episode 4 of Unprocessed and Unfiltered in the books, Kelly, where we talk about avoiding the fact that avoiding bad choices and making genuinely good ones are two different things, and that we really want to help people understand how to make really good nutrient dense choices to really make their bodies sing and dance, as opposed to just avoiding the stuff that we know is bad.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Kelly, for joining. Thank you,
Bye,
everybody, for
everybody.
joining. Okay, now I have to figure out how to turn us off. Okay.